Breaking tonight, a huge moment for the populist movement as the two biggest issues in America come to a head on healthcare and immigration. Both parties have got it wrong, and President Trump's populist instincts are right. But can he deliver the lasting changes that working Americans need? Evening, everyone, and welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism. Look who's here, live in Los Angeles, to discuss all of that, plus the new White House Chief of Staff, the 2020 race, and the latest from the swamp, including the members of Congress who you've just booted out, heading straight back in as lobbyists, and the latest shenanigans over donations to the Trump inaugural committee. Yes, we have Jason Chaffetz, Tomi Lahren, Corey Lewandowski, and David Bossie. Wow. I don't know how we're going to cope with all that. We're going to try. But let me just set things up for you on these two massive issues dominating the news as we head into the holidays. Look at it from a populist perspective. What is best for working Americans? Not the rich, not the donors, not the activists, but regular working people. On immigration, establishment Republicans have wanted cheap labor, and establishment Democrats have wanted cheap votes. Working Americans lost out as uncontrolled immigration kept wages low. On healthcare, the Republicans have gone too far right and the Democrats too far left, when what we actually need is a major reform that delivers universal healthcare using free market solutions. That's how I see it, and I think President Trump has got the right instincts on all of that. With me to debate all of this, Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren, Fox News contributor, former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, author of the book The Deep State: How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda, and the co-authors of their new book Trump's Enemies: How the Deep State, you spotting a theme here, is undermining the presidency. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and Fox News contributor David Bossie. Let's start with immigration. I just want to play something for all of you that I saw today that actually really annoyed me. And I want to explain why in a second. But let's just hear from Stephen Miller, the president's top policy advisor on immigration.
This is a very fundamental issue. At stake is the question of whether or not the United States remains a sovereign country, whether or not we can establish and enforce rules for entrance into our country. The Democrat Party has a simple choice. They can either choose to fight for America's working class or to promote illegal immigration. You can't do both.
Look, it's fine, right? Maybe you could agree or disagree, but I think it's a little bit late for these kind of high-minded sort of generalist statements when what we actually got was a very specific promise. Let's hear this again. We all know it from his boss, from Stephen Miller's boss. Listen.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Yeah. Mark my words.
Yeah. Right, so Stephen Miller seems to me, instead of sort of wandering around the TV studios going on about the general principle, 2 years into the administration, what has happened to that very specific promise? Build the wall, Mexico's going to pay for it. If Mexico's going to pay for it, what's all this business with Chuck and Nancy and a government shutdown if the Congress doesn't give the president the money? Jason.
Well, Congress ultimately has to appropriate the money. It's embarrassing to me that 2 years into this administration, the Republicans who had the House and Senate and the presidency, and I know you have to get to 60 in the Senate, but they should have held the line and made sure that funding comes. There are ways to make Mexico pay for it. You can charge more for going through across our borders. There's lots of other things you can do, but putting America first in protecting our borders and the integrity of that border is paramount, and it's Congress to blame, not the president. He's leading the way, but Congress has been a really mixed bag.
Congress has been controlled by the Republicans for 2 years.
I know.
Yeah, well, we call them Republicans, but when it comes to immigration, they're undercover Democrats, and this is what we've been dealing with for years, and I think the American people are finally starting to see it. But if states continue to put up rhinos and you wonder why we don't have a fully funded wall, there you go.
Corey?
Look, Steve, the Republican leadership in Congress for the last 2 years has been an open border Republican leadership, and Paul Ryan was very clear. He didn't want the wall. He fought the president every step of the way. They've now funded $1.6 billion for the wall on multiple occasions, but if the president has to use the military to build this wall or use funds from the military, then let's do that, because there's nothing more important than the sovereignty of our country.
Well, now you're talking, and by the way, I just want to, again, repeat the case for this from a populist, pro-worker point of view. Okay, this is not some kind of right-wing thing about hating immigrants and whatever. It's about an orderly process that protects everybody's interests, those who are trying to come here legally and working Americans still here. Okay, everyone has to understand that. David.
I think what Corey's talking about is exactly right. The Congress only wants to give, and they have failed for 2 years. You're exactly right. But right now, today, this president's asking for $5 billion. Congress is saying they're going to appropriate 1.6, and he is holding the line. I just want to put it in perspective. Many years ago under Barack Obama, the Cash for Clunkers program was $3 billion. Right. They found $3 billion to throw in the garbage can, which is what that program essentially was. And they can't find $3 billion to help this president secure our borders.
And I mean, all the time you hear that. I mean, just today there was someone from the military on about the damage to one of the army bases from the hurricane in the late summer, looking for $3.6 billion for that. I'm not saying that is not needed. It's not in the same category of waste. But the point is, this $5 billion is nothing.
Oh, we're going to spend $4 trillion over the next 12 months. And so,
okay, can I just start? Is Corey right that you can just take it from another budget?
You really can, because there are lists. Oh, absolutely. There are lists after
lists. The end of the story. Just get on with it. Right.
Let's solve the problem. Immigration issues done. Let's go.
Well, I mean, I've been told, the sort of what's it called, the power of the purse and everything. But yeah, but the Congress shouldn't micromanage everything in this way. Right. Quickly on healthcare. Again, want to play something, very clear promise from the president in 2016 in the campaign. Let's just listen to what he said about healthcare then.
I am going to take care of everybody. I don't care if it costs me votes or not. Everybody's going to be taken care of much better than they're taken care of now.
Right, so take care of everybody. I think one of the things that people heard from President Trump in 2016, he was not and you two were right there, he was not the same old Republican. And I think that sometimes the Republican, 8 years now, they've done nothing. The big promise to repeal and replace Obamacare, not delivered. I think they got too ideological. It seems to me that the president understands that for working people, this is a real worry, the financial worry of not having health care, and he wants universal health care. That doesn't mean it has to be delivered through the kind of single-payer mechanism that I think the Democrats have mistakenly adopted.
Steve, look, this president has said it from the beginning, and Congress has to do this. You have to be able to buy health insurance across state lines. You can do it with car insurance. I don't understand why we don't have a system that if you live in California and you can find a cheaper rate for what you need for health insurance in Oklahoma, you should be able to buy that. This is insanity that we haven't done this, and this can be done in one of two ways. The Secretary of Labor can sign an executive order doing it, or the president can do it. It doesn't even need congressional approval, but we have to give people choices in health care, and it has to happen soon.
That's what I mean. Market mechanisms, but the promise of being covered should be there for everyone.
Well, of course, but let me just start with the Affordable Care Act has made premiums not affordable. Average Americans have seen their premiums double since this policy has been in place, since Nancy Pelosi passed it so that we could learn what was in it. That is what we all have gotten, is double our premiums today.
Okay, very quickly, we got to go, but your quick thoughts on this healthcare situation.
Well, as you mentioned, there's a difference between access and having a little card and actually being able to afford it. So yes. I agree with you, free market solutions all the way. Don't go the direction of California and provide it for every time.
Well, I just think we got to, but not on the insurance. I think we've got to separate the insurance from the provision. I think that is the big problem. Jason, last word.
They have to get united and just make it happen. But 40 times when I was in the House, 40 times we voted to repeal it, and then as soon as Donald Trump was the president, we could actually do it. Guess what? Our leadership never put that bill back up on the floor.
I think it's absolutely humiliating that they still haven't figured out how to do this. It's a shame on the Republican Party. Anyway, sorry, it's all right. You've got a lot to say, and we're going to have lots more on all of this. We've got a special Swamp Watch for you tonight. Don't miss that. We've got the head of Open Secrets. They're the people who put together all that fantastic information we use to expose the corruption in Washington. But next, if you know any Trump haters, you might want to call them now and ask them to watch the next segment. That's all I'm saying. Don't go away. Okay, so something caught my eye this week. Did you see this? It was an official meeting in Europe of the Paris Climate Accord process, which, of course, President Trump pulled America out of. Look what happened when a U.S. representative took the stage to explain our position.
If we are serious about eradicating poverty and providing universal access to affordable, reliable energy, it is clear that energy innovation and fossil fuels will continue to play a leading role. Energy access.
Very strange. You know how climate change activists never stop going on about believing the science and how facts matter. Well, then why aren't they cheering the United States instead of jeering? In the evil populist Trump's America, Here's what happened to energy-related carbon emissions. In 2017, they fell by 0.5%. But in the saintly globalist European Union, they went up by 1.5% in the same period. In fact, per capita carbon emissions in Trump's America are nearly at a 70-year low. Turns out energy deregulation does more to fight climate change than going to conferences. I guess you might call that an inconvenient truth. There's a lot of those about. This one's pretty inconvenient if you're the kind of person that goes around saying Trump is a fake populist, that he's not doing anything to help the forgotten men and women in this country.
All he had time for was celebrities. And now suddenly he's acting like he's a populist out there. Man, I'm going to fight for working people. Come on, man.
He's trying to tell us he cares about the middle class. Give me a break. That's a bunch of malarkey.
Malarkey. I want Joe Biden to run just in 2020, just so we hear more of that word. But look, America's poverty rate was lower in Trump's first year than at any point in the Obama administration. Okay, whatever. But of course, the middle class was screwed by the Trump tax cuts that only helped the rich, right? Oh, wait, the Trump tax cuts doubled the standard deduction to $12,000 for individuals and $24,000 for families. That is a huge change that takes millions of Americans out of federal income tax altogether and has effectively increased incomes for middle-class families across the country. What else helps the middle class? Jobs. But of course, that idiot Trump couldn't create them.
When somebody says, like the person you just mentioned, who I'm not going to advertise for, that he's going to bring all these jobs back. Well, how exactly are you going to do that? He just says, well, I'm going to negotiate a better deal. Well, how exactly are you going to negotiate that? What magic wand do you have?
Yeah, Trump, what magic wand do you have? I don't know, maybe just better economic policy, the kind that results in the lowest unemployment rate since 1969 and the lowest African-American unemployment ever. Also, wasn't Trump going to crash the economy?
Economists left, right, and center all agree Donald Trump will drive America back into recession.
Left, right, and center. Inconvenient truth, Hillary. Even the New York Times, I think left, just gave Trump credit for the fact that the U.S. economy is on track for its, quote, best annual performance since 2005. All right, whatever, jobs and growth, but Trump still isn't delivering his promises to working people. I mean, after decades of stagnation, incomes are still flat, aren't they?
The thing that we've been looking at for quite a while that doesn't seem to be moving too much is wages.
Oh dear. That turns out not to be true anymore. Wages have risen all the way through the last 2 years and we're up 3.1% in the last quarter, the highest level in a decade. Fine. But it's all going to be ruined, isn't it, by Trump's crazy trade war with China. In fact, the elitists seem to hate Trump so much they even took China's side. Remember how they thrilled to the brutal autocrat Xi Jinping at Davos last year? They just lapped up his speech on the virtues of globalization. The president of the EU-owned European Investment Bank said, in these times of a lack of leadership, particularly in Europe, it was quite impressive. Ooh, President Xi, you're quite impressive. But what's actually happening is that President Trump's pressure is working. China is on the back foot, making trade concessions and now pledging to drop its Made in China 2025 program, which was Xi Jinping's grand plan to achieve world domination in the industries of the future. We'll see if they mean it, but even the fact that they're saying it is a major victory for that idiot Trump, who obviously doesn't know what he's doing. Just like with North Korea, remember?
We have what I think the total is 7,100 individual nuclear warheads. I don't even want to know the destructive capability is there. And we're about to hand the launch orders over to a guy who can't stay away from his phone for 15 minutes.
It was outgoing President Obama who told President-elect Donald Trump that North Korea would be his #1 problem. Trump actually listened to him, did something about it, and turned our relationship around in a way that has made the world incomparably safer. And then, just this week, we saw incredibly important substantive progress from this administration. Major criminal justice reform led by Jared Kushner now looking good for passage in the Senate. A major new effort to revitalize urban America and rebuild low-income neighborhoods led by Ben Carson. And a highly significant new strategy from John Bolton to fight China's attempted colonization of Africa. On top of that, America this week becoming a net oil exporter for the first time in 75 years, enabling us to reduce the global influence of dodgy regimes in the Middle East and elsewhere. Yeah, but he's still an idiot, though, isn't he? He's still Trump. Look, the point here is this. We'll never persuade the Trump haters on the left and the right to change their feelings about the president. They just can't stand him. But more than anything, it's aesthetic. They find him vulgar, not to their taste. Fine. But could you just focus on the facts? Could you just acknowledge, even for a day or so over Christmas, that on the facts, on policy, on the substance, this is, so far, a pretty successful presidency? Tell me what you think of that at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X. Tommy, what do you think?
Well, when you talk about the Trump haters never becoming Trump lovers or even accepting the facts, it's because they have an answer for everything. If you talk about all the accomplishments, you can go through it, you can set it right in front of their face. They're still going to tell you it was Barack Obama who did it. So at the end of the day, they have an answer for everything. It's okay, though, because they can hate Trump. They can do it all they want. He's still our president. He's still doing great things for the American people. So let them have their late night shows. Let them have their comedy. We're fine.
You know, Steve, you look at people like Bill Kristol and Jennifer Rubin who say they're supposed to be conservatives, who wanted a conservative president to come in and govern conservatively. Bill Standard's now out of a job at the Weekly Standard because they're such Trump haters. You didn't even talk about the judges, the 100-plus conservative judges that he's put on the bench that will fundamentally change the direction to a conservative bend on the courts for generations to come. That's what this president, he said what he was going to do, and he's doing it, but they won't give him the credit because they don't like the way he delivers the message.
I think that's exactly right. It's just it's the style, isn't it? It's not the substance.
Well, that's all they can argue on is style because the substance is working. They can't argue the facts. And so when you can't argue the facts.
Say that, people think, oh, you're just some sort of crazy, slavish, sort of Trump fawning. But you know, like those are real facts.
No, and that's not where I started. Corey can tell you. That's not where I started. But I got to tell you, what I love about this president is what he did. And what he said is what he's doing. And I love the fact that he's exactly the same person that he was as a candidate he is as the president, and it's working. And putting America first was always something you heard from every candidate. But this guy actually does it, and I love it.
Yeah, the left and the mainstream media, the Jennifer Rubins of the world, hate this president more than they love the country. And that is the fundamental failure. That is the divide we have today. They just have not accepted the results of the 2016 elections. That's what it comes down to.
I'd put it a slightly different way. I mean, I think that there is a general kind of political point that, you know, good news for America is bad news for opponents of the administration, whether on the left or the right. I'm not sure I would, you know, question their sort of fundamental patriotism, but they definitely, you know, and even though they would never admit it, don't want to see the president succeed because it hurts them politically.
If Trump's for it, then they're going to be against it. It's a simple formula for them. They don't really go and look and argue a policy or a principle. They just say they're against the president.
The other thing I think was a bit of the problem is the way that none of this is covered. I mean, the media just endlessly focus on Russia and the scandal and investigations. And no, I'm not saying that's not important or shouldn't be covered at all, but the fact that it leads, you know, so many news programs is just ridiculous.
That's all they have. That's all that they have, and that's falling apart. We talk about $5 billion for the wall. How much have we spent on the Russia investigation? Astronomical amount, and what do we have?
Well, Steve, don't forget, 90% of the mainstream media's coverage of this president has been negative, and that would be acceptable if we were in an economy that was 20% unemployment, if we had the highest unemployment in a generation. We don't. He's put America back to work, and this notion that we're putting America first, I don't understand why that's a foreign idea to people here. We're not here to put other countries first. We have a $22 trillion deficit that we have to take care of, but we're going to put Americans back to work for us. And by the way, we're the greatest country in the world, and we should be proud of it.
And you know, I'd say it's not even the negative coverage. I would take it if at least they covered the other stories, and even negatively, but just cover the fact that you've got this amazing criminal justice reform. Okay, you may disagree with it, whatever, but they barely talk about it. The Ben Carson thing, I literally don't think anyone except Laura Ingraham, who I noticed did a piece on it, in any of the media talked about it. This incredibly important effort for inner city America.
No, look, this president for 2 years has been fighting that exact point. To Corey's point is 90% of the media coverage is against this president. This president has done the American people a favor by educating all of us that the fake news divisions across the media are absolutely against him, and he has made the American people understand that fact, and he has educated them that they are against what we are for, and I think he's doing us a service.
Well, you know, I hope that some of the, I mean, especially, you know, things like the carbon emissions, for example. I mean, that is just, you know, there's just completely ingrained view, isn't there, that he's just totally hostile to the environment, whereas America who's leading on carbon. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but it just drives me so crazy. Anyway, coming up, in positive and practical next, Jason Chaffetz has an idea for how to fix Congress, and we need plenty of those. Not sure Nancy Pelosi is going to like it, or any of the Republicans either, for that matter. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Soon enough, Nancy Pelosi will be Speaker of the House again, with her pal Steny Hoyer back as Majority Leader. As The Who once said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Fixing that is at the heart of former Congressman Jason Chaffetz's positive and practical idea for making Congress work better. Come on, then.
Well, there should be term limits for leadership positions in the House. House Republicans do it this way, and nobody else, not in the Senate, not the House Democrats do it, and that is you can only serve for 3 terms in that leadership position, and then you got to move on. I became the chairman of the Oversight Committee. It was only the 5th time in 100 years that I did it after 3 terms, and I did that because it was based on merit and a steering committee and a vote. It wasn't based on how much money I donated and raised. The thing about Nancy Pelosi, she's raised more money than any person in the House or Senate, Democrat or Republican. That's why she has the leadership position.
So let's just be clear. This is not the same as term limits for elected officials.
No, if you want to do term limits, right, by the way, do it for the bureaucrats. Do it for the federal.
That's really important.
Do it for the federal workforce. You want to see us to have a different government, do it that way. But every 2 years, House members have to stand up for an election. Every 6 years in the Senate. But the leadership positions need more turnover.
Totally. And just why I'm going to do a quick plug, because my next deep dive on Fox Nation is going to be with Jason. We're going to be talking about the deep state, and let's make sure we get into that there. But you've got to sign up at foxnation.com in order to do that. One last quick question before I bring the gang in. Why will this make a difference? The chairs of the committees being term limited. Why would that help make Congress work better?
Because you want new, fresh eyes on it. I once read a book, it's called It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, It's the Fast That Eat the Slow. And you don't want somebody who gets so entrenched and becomes just this creature of Washington, D.C. Right. Get in, serve, and then get out. And then let somebody else take that baton.
And last, sorry, I said the last one was the last one, but really the last one, which is that, and this is a sort of rule change that they could just make for themselves. They don't need legislation.
Yes, House Republicans do it now, and it's a good thing. But the senators, if you've been there, you sit there for decades, then guess what? You get to be the chairman.
Response, David.
Jason's exactly right, but we need term limits for Congress. We need term limits for the House and the Senate. 12 years in both houses is perfectly fine. We're a citizen legislature. We should go back to that.
Okay. Do you agree?
Well, I agree, and I agree with your point as well. You know, the money shouldn't control everything, but then I also worry, I mean, Nancy, then she's just going to pick the next in line. She's still got the money.
What she's actually saying that she's going to do that. I mean, she calls it something like mentoring, but what that really means is putting her person in.
Please pick Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Please pick her, because that would be the best thing that could happen to the Republicans.
Look, I think it's important, but I think what's more important for the country is a balanced budget amendment. I think it should be a change to the U.S. Constitution. Yes. It should be something that Congress takes up as a priority so that we are in a position to not leave our children, our grandchildren in greater debt than we have today.
Okay, so quickly, I want to go to another point which we were just discussing, which is the funding for the wall. And Corey said, why can't he should take it out? The president should take it out of the defense budget. It's a national security issue. You said there's a lot of precedent for that.
You can go to the Congressional Budget Office and pull up a list. They have hundreds of programs that are funded by the government that aren't authorized by Congress. It happens every day. So don't give me this excuse they got to pass some law. They can actually do this. They do it every single day.
The administration can do it. So why do you think they're not doing it?
Oh, I think the president, that's going to be what this president is going to do. He is going to get this wall built over this next 2 years, and he is going to find the money, whether the Congress appropriates it in a wall bill or it's through the military. This president's going to stand up. He means what he says, and he says what he means. That's the difference here.
And you've just been there.
I was just there, and what most people don't understand, and I think actually Democrats would be more on board for what they think this wall is if they would go down and actually look at it, which, by the way, I've challenged several to come do with me, and they haven't taken me up on it. But it doesn't look like a wall like you see behind us. It looks like a fence, but it is reinforced with steel and filled with concrete. And you can see through it, which is what our border agents agents want. So a lot of this landing mat style, which is really pathetic, is already being replaced with this bollard fencing. It's incredibly effective. Donald Trump approved that with fiscal year 2017 funding, and we just need more of it now. They're having to reallocate resources and border agents to try to make up for the area has not been replaced yet. If we could just replace that old landing mat style, I think also, just
again, to your point about convincing Democrats of this, it's actually sort of pro-humanitarian to have a kind of properly constructed system with a proper, and also not just the wall, but the immigration courts, which are a disaster, right? Funding the immigration system is good for everyone.
Well, and look, if you look at the president's pick for the interim chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, who came out of the Office of Management and Budget, the organization that oversees where the government spending is actually taking place, and putting an eye on those things, that should tell everybody that he has a priority of finding the money for the wall, and they're going to build it.
Well, they're very good tease, Corey, because we're going to be talking about Mick Mulvaney a bit later. But just last word, do you think he should go pushing ahead with this shutdown if he doesn't get the money, just quickly?
100%.
Yes?
Look, I'd love to see the government shut down, but if you're going to reopen it, you have to have a win is the issue, and Nancy and Chuck aren't going to give you that win.
Okay, sounds like that's a no.
Force the members to vote on it, and they can vote on it every single day. We absolutely need the wall.
We need the wall. This president should look. If the president feels that that a shutdown is right, his political instincts are the best that we have in the Republican Party today. If he thinks it's right, but Corey's point is we need a win to come out of it, whatever that win is.
Chuck Schumer certainly seems very kind of dug in on not giving him that. Anyway, thanks everyone. Later on, one of the people round this table was on the short list to be the new White House chief of staff. Who was it? Was that Tommy? What does he think? He gave it away. But the person who got the gig, and why is it just interim? But next, is the DC swamp filling back up as fast as we can drain it? Swamp Watch investigates next. You vote them out and then they head straight back in. About 100 current members of the House and Senate will leave Congress next year, and many of them will dive headfirst into the DC swamp with new jobs as lobbyists and strategic advisors, and all the rest of the swampy nonsense we cover here regularly. So, can anything be done to stop the revolving door? Refilling the DC swamp is tonight's Swamp Watch. So here to break it all down is Sheila Krumpholz. She's Executive Director at the Center for Responsive Politics. And I just want to point out to our audience that so much of what we put out there every week on Swamp Watch, the data that comes from the organization that Sheila leads and the website they have, Open Secrets. And I just want to thank you so much, Sheila, you and your team, for the incredible work. We literally couldn't do Swamp Watch without you. So I just want to start by saying that. But let's get to this point about lobbying. I think it's one of the constant themes of Swamp Watch is this revolving door. You go out of Congress and you go straight back in as a lobbyist. Now, I use the term straight back. I know that there's a sort of gap that has to be observed, but how do you see it? What's been happening, and what do you think is going to happen with this year's group of members of Congress who are exiting?
Yes, thank you. So every time there's a power shift in Congress, Washington goes through its own version of the NBA draft, with K Street, the boulevard that's synonymous with the lobbying industry, kind of competing to get the most powerful departing members of Congress and staff as well. So that's what's going on now. We have about 100 members departing Congress. The lobbying industry is growing again, and there's going to be fierce competition to get some of the most powerful former chairs and ranking members of Congress.
And what are the rules that are supposed to get in the way of any corruption here?
Yeah, there is a cooling off period that members of Congress have to honor. So in the House, it's a 1-year ban on lobbying their former colleagues after they leave Congress. And in the Senate, it's a 2-year ban. And that's meaningful because the longer you have to wait before you can lobby your former colleagues, the more stale your contacts, your expertise grows. So it is a meaningful, from their perspective, sacrifice, from our perspective, an important kind of period for them to not be trading on those contacts and expertise.
But they find ways around that, don't they?
They do. And principally, they act not as registered active lobbyists, but as senior advisors, strategic advisors. I like to say they're kind of the generals leading the troops from the rear, dictating what is done on behalf of clients some of them act as rainmakers at law firms and lobbying firms. So they're attracting the big corporate clients, and then other people do kind of the work of contacting members and leading the charge. So,
and is there anything specific you would propose to deal with this?
Well, the first thing we always propose is that people get smart and get savvy about how the system really operates. Truth is, we can't really hold the lobbyists accountable. They don't work for us. Our members of Congress do. And so we need to make sure that we know what the members are doing in our name. We voted them in. Now, we employ them. We need to know what they're doing up there. And then we also need to make sure that we know who's lobbying them, what they want in return, and whether they're getting it, and whether what they're getting in votes, in bills passed or killed, is in the constituents' best interest.
So transparency. Just one quick change of subject. But I want to get your take on it because it's in the news. This investigation of the Trump inaugural committee for foreign donors. What do you make of all of that?
Well, for foreign donors, and reports are talking about alleged questions about how much money was spent on what. So there are a few questions rolling out there, but reports are focused on a few Middle Eastern countries and the connections to the head of the Presidential Inaugural Committee, Tom Barrack, and his connections, introductions of Rick Gates, the person kind of handling logistics for the committee, and connections to business people, wealthy individuals in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. So there is a lot of smoke, but not a lot of, or we don't know exactly what's going on, but just a lot of allegations at this point.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I'm sure you'll keep an eye on it, and we will too. Sheila, really appreciate you could join us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, there's a new interim chief of staff in the White House. What is that all about? We asked the experts, including one of our guests who was on the shortlist for the job, after the break. All right, Mick Mulvaney is in as interim White House Chief of Staff, or acting White House Chief of Staff, can't remember. Anyway, a pretty relevant topic for Corey and David, who co-authored the book Trump's Enemies, How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency, and Jason, whose book is The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is working to destroy the Trump agenda. The reason I'm saying both those book titles again is if you haven't bought them yet, please go and do it, because they're great. Mick Mulvaney, I just thought you'd like to see this if you haven't seen it already. A little clip from him talking about President Trump in 2016. Let's have a look.
Yes, I'm supporting Donald Trump. I'm doing so as enthusiastically as I can, given the fact I think he's a terrible human being.
A terrible human being. Okay, so I was just intrigued by the notion that he's the acting chief of staff, the interim chief of staff, and I was just wondering, David Bossy, since you were widely discussed in connection with this job, whether he's really just keeping it warm for you.
I don't think so, Steve. Look, Mick Mulvaney is an incredible leader. He is going to do a great job for this president. He brings a host of background wide in policy and politics and the legislative process. His budget background, finding money for the wall. He is going to serve this president as of whatever it's going to be, January 2nd, in that capacity, and we'll see if he ends up staying there. I think it gives this president time to make the right decision, a thoughtful decision that he wants somebody who's going to be with him through the 2020 election, and Mick Mulvaney and several others can help guide him in that way.
Including you.
Well, you know, it's a humbling thing to be on that list, Steve, to be honest. And so I do the best I can helping this president every single day. You know, Corey and I were with him on Friday and had a chance to visit with him and talked about a lot of these issues. And we talked about his future for the next 2 years.
All right, very good. I'm not going to go any further. That was very interesting. I want to actually go back to our earlier topic because we had such a lot of interesting points on that about members of Congress going into lobbying. Jason, you pointed out a glaring loophole in the rules that are supposed to prevent the corruption.
There's no prohibition for a member of Congress the day after to start to lobby the administration. Remember, there are 2.2 million federal employees. And so if you leave Congress, you can't go talk to your fellow congressman for a year in the House, 2 years in the Senate, but you can go talk to the administration all day long, and a lot of them do.
And you had some points about how to solve you brought up term limits again, David, when we were talking about this.
Because it dilutes the power of these members. If we have term limits, you have a lot more of them, and you'll have a lot more turnover amongst the staff. And that's where power really, it gravitates around the very few, very important and powerful staffers that end up being there for a very long time. If you have more turnover in Congress, you will defeat that, and that makes it better for every American.
It's interesting because you hear term limits over and over again, but you've all made such a powerful case for it in different ways.
This
on
president
the show tonight.
supports term limits.
Very interesting. Tommy, quick thoughts on
Well, I agree with him, and I think the reason we don't talk about term limits enough is because it's not as sexy as talking about the wall or talking about
We're
Russia
going to make it sexy tonight.
or anything else.
Make it sexy, exactly.
But it makes sense.
Look, the professional staff members, those that are running these committees, have all of the influence. When their bosses come and go, many of them stay there. And they are the individuals that, when they decide to leave Capitol Hill, demand significant salaries and have the opportunity to go back and influence the process unduly in a bad way. And that should change.
And that's what we cover the whole time.
There is this great story out that about a congressman who went to go meet with a secretary, but the secretary wasn't there. It was just the staff was there. He said, "Oh, I'm meeting with the B team," and they said, "Yeah, we be here before you, and we be here after you. We are the B team."
There you go. Right, and that's, to be honest, that's why we focus on, when we do Swamp Watch, we look at the staff just as much as the members. All right, thank you, everyone. Coming up, a new poll shows the surprising top choices Democrats want to run in 2020. We reveal the frontrunners. And will President Trump face a Republican primary challenger? That is next. Welcome back. A new poll shows who Iowa Democrats want as their candidate in 2020. Joe Biden is in first with 32%, followed by Bernie Sanders with 19%, Beto O'Rourke with 11%, and Elizabeth Warren with 8%. All right, let's bring in, let's start with the campaign guys. Corey, David, I mean, look, you're not going to say who, that President Trump is vulnerable to any of them, but just give us your take on that list, particularly Beto.
Look, he's a completely unproven commodity. He's never won an election for a real race other than a small congressional district in a big state. And so, look, he's not going to be leading the ticket, that I can guarantee you. What you are going to see is a Michael Bloomberg, a Joe Biden, maybe Crooked H back on the top of the ticket somewhere. We don't know.
I know. This is what I thought. I thought when I watched her concession, at that moment, I thought, you have not given up. You're going to be going.
She'll never give up.
We could only hope. Look, the Democrats are. I don't think that they can do that to themselves again, put her at the top of the ticket. Elizabeth Warren has really worn out her welcome with the American people. I don't think she's going to be strong. Joe Biden is a serious candidate. There's no question about that. He will give this president a run for his money when it comes to the working men and women, the blue-collar worker that Joe Biden has spent his career trying to cultivate his image within that. But if you look at the manufacturing jobs that this president has brought back, that under Obama and Biden, they were destroyed. You look at the economy. I think this president has a pretty good record to run on, a very good record to run on. But I'm not really worried about them. It's the Michael Bloombergs, the Oprah Winfreys, the out-of-the-box candidate.
Yeah, I agree with you about Oprah. Just one thought on Beto. Everyone's going on about Beto.
Well, first of all, let's talk about his real name is Robert. So let's first of all, let's get that out there in the open. His real name is Robert. So that was
funnily enough, it's the name I was thinking about. I was like, what's his nickname going to be? And funnily enough, and in the context of Elizabeth Warren, so there was a nickname that the president used for Elizabeth Warren before he settled on Pocahontas. It's one of my favorites, actually, but he didn't use it very much. Goofy. He called her Goofy Elizabeth Warren. He did that at least once, maybe more. I think that's a really good one for Beto. Just saying. Anyway,
I think Robert's a good name.
I think we should just call him Robert.
What his actual name is. That's probably right.
I'm with you.
Now, quick turn to the Republican side, because there has been a lot of speculation about a primary challenger for President Trump. What do you think?
Non-starter.
Okay.
It's not going anywhere.
Another. Do you agree with that?
Well, I hope to see Kasich and Jeff Flake. I think that would be wonderful. I mean, we would all fall asleep within the first 2 minutes. It would be over. But wouldn't that be wonderful to see Kasich and Jeff Snowflake up there? I'd love it.
And the other thing that I've heard from a number of people, it's started to be written about, is this notion that President Trump is actually not going to run again. And so I just wanted to ask you, what % chance do you say there is of President Trump not running again?
Zero is the chance. Look, he's a 100%
I think this guy does know what he's
I know the president very well. He's 100% running. And 1 for 49, John, that's the primaries. He won 1 for 49 is how many he won. Has zero chance. He's going to go to New Hampshire. He's going to try and campaign there, or to California, because California's now moved up in the process for the RNC. And so he's going to have to bifurcate his time, and he basically might as well run as a Democrat.
Who?
John Kasich.
Oh, I see. So sorry.
Because he is.
Yeah.
Look, John Kasich is, to Corey's point, he's going to try to run a very small campaign in a couple of places. He's not going to go anywhere. This president has the backing of the Republican Party base. He is so strong with his base. It can't get any stronger. We interviewed the president for our book, and he feels so comfortable in his own skin when it comes to the promises made, promises kept to the Republican base, whether it's judges, the economy, or national security. He has hit it out of the park.
Steve, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue when his supporters aren't leaving. I'm just saying.
Just stop. Okay, it was going so well. And anyway, that was great. Really good discussion. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. It's been great having you here. Really appreciate it. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you very much for watching us. Don't forget, by the way, to check out Deep Dive with me and Jason. That's on Fox Nation. You can learn more about the Next Revolution by following us at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X. Mark Levin is up next. I'm Steve Hilton. See you next Sunday when the Next Revolution will be televised.